After I had the list, then I reduced it. I was told to get some 3x5 cards. And in the upper left-hand corner of the card, write the person's name. And underneath that, a phone number or an address. And in the middle of the card, the harm I've done, specific harm I've done. And in the upper right-hand corner, write either a plus or a minus, depending on whether you're willing to make amends. And I went all over that with the guy that had taken me through the process, and we looked at each one, and I was clear on the harm, and he said, now the prayer changes again. The prayer now is this: take me to my next amends and give me the power to make it. Because I don't have enough power. You get the power only from step 8, the willingness. And step 8 willingness comes out of step 7. Step 7 comes out of 6, and 6 comes out of 5, and 5 comes out of that inventory, and it each builds, and it builds, and it builds. So now I'm tapped into some power, not my power, but power. Power that I can say, take me to my next amends and give me the power to make it. I flew to Denver, and I discovered the most astonishing thing. This sister of mine didn't marry him to annoy my father. She married him because she loved him. Damnedest thing, can you imagine? And they'd been married 30 years and she still loved him. And he loved her. And they had 3 white kids and 2 black kids and one that they had together, 2 they had together. They had in that home a colorblind home. I never saw anything like it. It was amazing. They had a guy that was a cop. They raised a cop. They raised an attorney. They raised an accountant. They raised a banker. They raised a guy that taught English to high school students in Tokyo. That's a very gifted guy that would go over there and speak Japanese and teach English. And they raised a retarded girl that worked in a department store. And there was a home with real harmony in it. And I flew out and I sat with my sister and her husband. I said, I'm so sorry. I've withheld my love and my approval from you all these years on a stupid mistake, and because I couldn't be bothered. I was so busy drinking. And I'm so sorry. And the questions are very simple. I came here to clean up our relationship. I've harmed you. Here's the harm. Here's what I see the harm is. And the second question is there any harm I haven't mentioned that you need to tell me about? And they will tell you. Number 3, do you need to tell me how any of this made you feel? And they will tell you. And number 4, what can I do to set this right? And sometimes they'll tell you. And if I'm there with the right attitude, they will tell me. I know Don, who somebody heard yesterday, went to his mother, and she said, as mothers often do, all I want is for you to be happy. Don took that as his instruction, his marching orders, and he goes now and sees his mother every week, and he's happy. He never lets her see him when he's not happy. He makes sure he's happy. In order to do that, you have to be happy. Which means he has to live his life in a way that allows him to be happy for his mother. Isn't that a heavy burden that AA imposes on you? But those step 9 responses, what do I need to do to make this right, can be very precious marching orders. I went to the, as I told you earlier, I ran inadvertently into the father of that little boy that I'd fallen in love with. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to make amends to him. He was very angry at me. Shopping for rifles for me, according to the rumors. And here we are in the same room at the same time. That morning I had said, take me to my next amends and give me power to make it. And God damn it, if he wasn't there in front of me at this little room, and I went, wow, not so quick, not that one. And I said, John, I need to talk to you. We were both at a little school where there was a Halloween pageant. I'd gone over there to take some photos, and John had come. It was his boy that was in that pageant, and I was there at Cindy's request. I mean, I felt like such a donkey. They had us sitting on these little chairs about that high, and every other parent in Santa Monica is in there with a video camera and about 400 feet of cable, you know, and there are all these videographers and stuff and professionals, and I'm going there with a little handheld camera. And there was John. And John agreed to go to a coffee shop, and we sat there, and I went through this process with him. I'm here to clean it up, John. I've dismissed you. I've treated you badly. I've talked about you. I've not supported your relationship with Daniel. I know he adores you, and I know you adore him. And I just need to clean this up with you. And he listened to all of that, and I said, is there anything you need to tell me? And he had some things he was mad about, and he told me. And I listened. And I said, do you need to tell me how any of that made? And he told me. He was not a happy camper. And I said, what can I do to set this right? And that's when he said, take care of my boy. And that's when I knew I'm screwed. I've got that kid in my life. Because I wasn't in love with him then. I mean, I liked him, but come on. And it made a huge difference for me. I flew to Portland and sat with my brother. I flew to, knelt at a grave in Roanoke, Virginia, where my dad is buried. I flew to the ex-wives and located them and sat with them, and to my children, and to all of the other people that I had hurt. Directly. And I finally did the thing I was never going to do. I went back to Billings and knelt at that grave where my mother had been buried so long prior, where I'd carried a heavy heart and anger and upset at my mother. And it took a lot of tramping around in the low-rent part of the cemetery in Billings, Montana for me to find that grave. And a wonderful Al-Anon knew I was going over there, and she gave me a shopping bag. She said, you're going to need these things there. My sponsor told me, write a letter to your mother and take it with you. And in the bag was a liter of water and some flower seeds and a pair of shears, scissors, some paper towels, and some Kleenex. She said, you're going to need these things out there. And a guy gave me a drive over there. And I finally found that grave, and I knelt down at that grave. I didn't know what to say or what to do. How do you make amends for all the trouble? And I sat there for a while, knelt there for a while, and then I walked down and found my grandma's grave, and then I came back up to my mom's grave. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was very afraid. And I looked back, and the guy's waiting for me in the car at the edge of the cemetery, and I didn't know what to do. And so I knelt down, and I dug a little thing, and I buried that letter. And then I got those flower seeds out and scraped around, and I planted those seeds. And now I'm feeling closer to her. And I carried this lump around with me for so long. And then I made a bad mistake. I took out those clippers and I started clipping around that grave marker. The thing she could never make me do. And I started to cry then. Oh God Almighty, how wrong I had been. Oh, I'm clipping and clipping. I cleaned that up. I made that look so great. Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. Oh, my God. Oh, I know now you always loved me, and I could always trust you. And I got up and I walked, and then I knew I wasn't done. I had to go back. I did that 3 or 4 times. The poor guy in the car, he'd turn on the engine, he'd see me, and then he could turn it off. But I came out of that cemetery at the end of that afternoon on a warm spring day in Billings, Montana, and I was free. And I loved my mama. Oh, I loved her. The Al-Anon called me the next week and said, you know, they're going to take on a project in Billings that you should know about. I said, what? They're going to make sure your mother's grave always looks great. And in the spring, after the snow is off, they send me a little card, a little photo of my mom's grave. And I get notes from the Al-Anons in Billings. I felt closer to my dad being there with your mother. A lot of love, you know. Just silly love. Just drive-by stuff. It makes no sense. Except it sets me free. And them too. I mean, I have taken other guys through these steps. I sit with them and we do an hour or whatever, and then they do it and another, and they go out to do these amends that are so precious to do. Alan was a building contractor, and he had a lot of problems. He had to go to a lot of buildings and say, you know what, I did a crappy job for you. What can I do to set this right? And they'll tell you, boy, they will tell you. And he cleaned it up. He cleaned it all up. Took him 1.5 years and about half his time, and he didn't get a nickel for it. He didn't charge him. He just cleaned it up. And his business is just thriving. And Gary went up to Fresno and Sacramento and sat with his folks and his sister and his sister, and he hated his sister. Of course, she had embarrassed him by being kind of a taker. And he sat down with her at a coffee shop. And when he did, he was afraid that he would bawl her out for being such a loser. And she said, just close that door, they'll be all right, yeah. And he was ready to take her on for being such a loser, for being an embarrassment. And she was, the first thing she said when he sat down, he said, I just came here to tell you how sorry I am I haven't been more in your life. And she started crying. She said, oh, I'm so afraid that you're here to bawl me out for being such a loser. And he said no. And he started to cry. And it was a wonderful experience for him because there was a healing in it with he and his sister. And Tom was one of these guys that he had nothing to lose, and he just really did it. He really was quite something. And in the process of doing it, Tom was a window washer. Tom was also a burglar. And there's a nice dovetailing of the two careers, because you always know where to go back at the end of the day. And he had, in South Pasadena, burglarized maybe 13 or 14 homes. He and I had gone to court a couple of times, gotten some stuff expunged. He had worked hard to get the record cleaned up. He didn't need to go back to those homes. His name was not attached to it. But he knew he had to do that. And he knew where those homes were. He had a bad memory. Boy, it was quite clear to him where those homes were. He wished his memory wasn't so good. And he began to go, knock on a door in South Pasadena of a residence and say, did you live here 6 years ago? Yes. When your home was burglarized? Yeah, we lived here. I did that. And I came by to clean it up. You what? I did the burglary. What the hell are you here for? Because I want to get free, and I can't unless I clean it up with you. He could have been arrested at every one of those places. He was not. He was a guy that had backed his truck through the plate glass window of a bicycle shop one day and one night late and loaded a bunch of bikes in that truck and drove back out again. He had to go back there. The guy said, why are you, did your probation officer? And he said, no. He said to him, what can I do to set this right? And the guy looked at him and said, don't do that anymore. But he did it. It takes power to do that. There was one, he had gone there and they weren't home, and then he'd gone another time and sat out in front in his car, and he couldn't bring himself to go up to the door. And he drove away, and then he called me one morning. He said, it's the last amend I have to make, and I know I have to go over there today, and I want to go over there today, and I want to get rid of it. And I said, you want me to go with you? He said, no, but I will call you when I'm done. And about 11 o'clock, my phone rang again, and Tom said I finished, and I could tell from his voice that it was fine. But I asked him what had happened, and he said they invited me in, an older couple invited me into their home, knowing that I had burgled the place. And they asked me a lot of questions. They wanted to know why the mirror had been ripped off the wall, and I told them I thought there was a safe behind it. And they wanted to know this and that, and they gave me a real quizzing about the detail of the thing. And he said, I stayed there for a bit, and then finally I said, what can I do to set this right? And they said, we're even. And he said, what do you mean? They said, the reason we're even is because until right now, when you came by, we had always thought our son had done that. And so family healed up, and Tom got free, and I watched a miracle happen for him. And powerful, powerful stuff. Let's take a little break and come back at 5 o'clock and finish up. Did anybody ever do anything with the Course in Miracles? Anybody ever have any idea of a concept that says at any given time we're either coming from love or fear? Generally familiar with such an idea? Generally, the thing come out of one of the disciplines that suggests that is called the Course in Miracles. And the Course in Miracles is a really remarkable kind of a discipline. And it has been part of general thought among spiritual teachers for some time, that at any given moment we're either coming from love or coming from fear. And to put it in terms of an AA experience, it means that I'm either living my life from my ego, or I'm living my life from a relationship with God. Or said a slightly different way, I can either come from intellect or intellect with power. So if I'm living my life from my ego, it's going to be an intellectual. All that's at play is my intellect. If I'm living my life from a relationship with God, it doesn't take long to figure out that's what I would be calling intellect with power. If I have power in my life, it comes from my relationship with God. That is not a big mystery. We would all kind of sign on for that. But let's look at, I start out the day, and let's say I start out from a relationship with God. I'm aware that I'm God's kid. I'm aware that I want to come from love. And not fear. If I'm coming from my ego, I'm always coming from fear. And if I'm coming from a relationship with God, it's all going to be, I'm coming from love. Now, let's say I get out on the freeway and somebody wants to get into my lane. If I'm coming from fear, what am I going to do? Speed up just enough. Why? What am I afraid of? They'll win. They'll beat me into town. That my career is over. And if I'm coming from love, what am I going to do? Drop off the accelerator and bring them in. And it's two very distinctly different actions. Which one is going to have me feeling a little better? Which one is going to have me more at peace? Does either of them matter in terms of my career or when I get into the courthouse? No, no. If I want to come, and so really basically, if I'm gonna, I can be on the left side of the page all day if I want to, but mostly I want to be right over here. And if over on this side, what would be my motivation? To be happy, to be happy. If I want to come from love, there's going to be some other characteristics. Let's look at it this way. One of the problems that I have if I'm coming from fear is scarcity. There's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough love. It's just the way I see it. So I'm coming from scarcity over here. If I'm coming from a relationship with God, if I'm coming from love, instead of scarcity, I'm going to have abundance. If I'm on the left side of the page, I want to win. I got to win. If I'm on the right side of the page, I'm more likely to surrender. Just surrender to the fact that the day is going to be whatever it is. I either think I have to beat the day or I'm going to accept the day exactly where it is. And when I'm objecting to the day, I'm objecting to a lot of things because the energy and power of the universe over the ages brings us to this day. And when I object to the day, I'm objecting to a lot. I may come from pride on the left side of the page. But if I'm on the right side of the page, I'm going to come from humility. I'm going to come from knowing the truth about what's going on. On the left side of the page, I may be defensive. On the right side of the page, I'll be defenseless. There's nothing to defend. Nothing to defend. On the left side of the page, I'm going to be reacting. He tried to get, I'm going to speed. The right side of the page, I'm at choice. I got a choice. I don't have to I just lay back a little bit. Let them come in. Who cares? But they had choice. On the left side of the page, I'm going to be coming from guilt. I'm a good guilt thrower, and I'm a good guilt catcher. On the right side of the page, I'm going to be coming from appreciation. On the left side of the page, I'm going to be coming from blame. I got to blame you because it didn't go right. On the right side of the page, I come from responsibility. On the left side of the page, I'm going to be coming from perception, which is just the way that I see reality through old ideas. On the right side of the page, I come from something far more precious called intuitive thought. On the left side of the page, my question is, what's in it for me? And that's my only question. On the right side of the page, the question is, how can I help? How can I help? On the left side of the page, I need a lot of control. On the right side of the page, I know we're all in the pool together, and I'm more interested in unity. On the left side of the page, I'm great at shame. I will accept shame and give shame. On the right side of the page, I'm into acceptance. On the left side of the page, my forgiveness is always conditional. I will forgive you, but I'll never forget it. Conditional forgiveness, conditional love. And on the right side of the page, it's love and forgiveness. It's not conditional. So it's two very different ways to go through a day. And when we were drinking, we had all of the harsh effects of living our life from our ego softened by alcohol or the promise of alcohol. And since we've been taken over here, on the right side of the page, coming from a relationship with God, if we wind up back over here, we don't have the alcohol to help us through this day, and it gets hideously uncomfortable. And so we have available to us at any given time either intellect or intellect with power. And that sets the stage for steps 10 and 11. Because we're going to wander around just a little bit during the course of a day. Because we need some way to deal with it. And knowing this about our intellect, knowing how it's going to go, and I might add that there is no blending of these two ways of being. We can move back and forth pretty rapidly, but it's not going to be partly ego and partly God. No. It's either I'm coming from my ego or I'm coming from a relationship with God. Those are the only two options that we have. I'm either coming from love or I'm coming from fear. And we can feel the difference. It's all very interesting. So as 10 says, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 10 also talks about the fact that every day is the day we carry our vision of God's will into our activity. Step 10 also talks about the fact that the whole point of the drill is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. How can I be most effective? Oh, stay on the right side of the page, pretty much. How can I do that? Well, I have to set my intention in the morning because I want to, and this is step 11 that I'm drifting into now, but I know what God's will for me is. He wants me to be happy, joyous, and free. What do I have to do to be that? I have to let go of some crap. I got to take my hand out of that vase. And I have to be willing to align my will with God's will. I have to do that. And the purpose of 10 is that only in moments will I be aligned. Most of my day is either going to be on one side or the other. I will be drifting off and coming back and drifting off. I'm like a guy in a small boat in a river with some current and some wind. There's a rudder there, and I will always be dragged off course. It's just a human condition, and I have to be okay with that. I must be okay with that. And if I can notice then when I'm off, that means that I am an awakened spirit. You got to sleep, and if you're going to be off a lot of the time, you have to go back to sleep because we can hardly stand it. You have to be in blame. Now, what does it mean when it says grow in effectiveness? That means I'm going to spend as little as time as possible off track. This is very ineffective living, to go out here in the far country and stay there for a week or two or a month or a year. Staying here during the course of the day as close to living with God's will as I can is the charge of step 10. Our purpose is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. There was a guy that did something very remarkable a few years ago. A professional basketball player got some hideously bad news. He found out that he was HIV positive, and he found it out from an insurance company report. And that was hugely, hugely devastating to him. He had a new marriage, a little boy, he had a career, he had endorsements. No one in those days was tolerant of HIV positive. There was just nothing to do with it. Now, if that had happened to me, I'm sure that I would have crawled under the bed and tried to keep it a secret as long as I could. Would that have been effective? No. No. This guy within 48 hours, did something quite remarkable. He called a press conference. And basically his question is, what can I do for you? Here's what happened to me. What can I do for you? And within a few years, he had advanced himself on a completely different career, that of a businessman. Oh, he tried to stay in basketball for a while and do this and that, but he's basically a friend of basketball, but he's hugely effective in business now. And that is a wonderful key to effective living, because this guy took a big hit and he got off track for a day or two, and then he's back on pretty much. And that's the whole point of step 10. That is the whole point of step 10 and 11. We are at this. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. We have to live it. There is this whole business of developing intuitive thought. This vital sixth sense is what the book calls it. And when we step on somebody's toes, if we're going to honor step 6, step 10, we promptly admit it. Because we're tapped into real power now, and the power itself compels promptness and gives new meaning to the term. We stop and say, I'm sorry, that tone was inappropriate. I'm so sorry. And we immediately turn our attention to who we can help. And the step 10 process isn't done until we have cleaned it up and turned our attention to somebody we can help. And and it isn't about taking a whole lot of time to ruminate over the day. It's just boom and on the way, boom and on the way. And sometimes we can't make the amends at that time. Sometimes there is no way for us to do anything but notice it and save it for the end of the day. And step 10 gets to be just a part of how we live our life. Does it take some exercise? Sure. Does it take some awareness? Yes. Do we have to be awake? Yes. And what would compel us? What on earth would compel us to be awake? Well, there's a wonderful thing that would compel us to be awake, because we've already had the most remarkable experience. And I'm talking about the promises that have begun to come true before we're halfway through step 9. On page 62, he lists the bedevilments. On page 83, he lists the promises. And look at how they line up. On page 52, we were having trouble with personal relationships. 31 pages later, when we've done the work that's called out, he says we will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. We couldn't control our emotional natures. 31 pages later, we will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. We were a prey to misery and depression. The promise, our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. We couldn't make a living. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. Isn't that something? And he wrote this in 1930. He wrote this in the midst of the Depression. We couldn't make a living. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We had a feeling of uselessness. 31 pages later, that feeling of uselessness and self-pity will slip away, will disappear. We were full of fear. 31 pages later, we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We were unhappy. The promise, we are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Page 52, we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Page 83, no matter how far down the scale we've gone, we'll see how our experience can benefit others. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. And most of all, we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. These are extravagant promises. They say they're not. I think they're extravagant. And I think they're being fulfilled among us. And we do these amends and they're being fulfilled among us. And we come on the edge of a wonderful, wonderful life. And we get very interested in, how am I going to go through this day? It's the only day I got. Am I willing to say, I'm sorry I spoke to you in that improper tone? A lot of times I am. And I get through, and so that's, if we were to carry this through, this whole idea through to step 11, we would find something even more, to me, more interesting. And that is, first of all, the principle of step 11 is awareness. Awareness. An awakened life. An awakened spirit. And meditation is something that some people enjoy and some people don't get much out of it. And sometimes I really love it and sometimes I have trouble finding the moment to do it. But I just want to tell you what somebody else's thought about meditation was, since we're going to talk about sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. Praying only for the power of knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. How many times have we known what the knowledge of His will for us is and never asked for the power to carry it out? God, that happens to me. Here's what this guy thought about meditation. Let that poor devil in here. Let's all look and stare. Here's step 11 under meditation. Picture yourself near a stream. Birds are singing in the crisp, cool mountain air. Nothing can bother you here. No one knows about this secret place. You are in total seclusion from that place called the world. The soothing sound of a gentle waterfall fills the air with a cascade of serenity. The water is clear. You can easily make out the face of the person whose head you're holding under the water. There now, feeling better? No extra charge for that, just passing it on. Just passing it on. So let's look at what the text says about step 11. The way he starts this out, and the sequencing is a little difficult to follow, but I'm on page 86. The first thing he has us do is hook into power, because he says, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. So if I'm going to begin the day with accepting some instruction from the book, I say, all right, I'll consider my plans for the day. But the very first thing, before we begin, I ask God to direct my thinking. I ask God to direct my thinking. And there's a reason for that, because there's two kinds of intellect available to me. One is intellect and one is intellect with power. Why would I want Him to direct my thinking? Because I want to come down this line of thinking, not this line. And if I ask Him to direct my thinking, He will surely have me over there on the right side of the page. The second thing I do is I ask that my thinking be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. This is like my eyes are open and I'm not out of bed yet. If I think I can afford to do this step after I shave, I probably better surrender to the fact that there's only 40 feet between me and the bathroom, and I better do it while I'm still in the kip, because it may not get done. And then I consider my plans for the day. That's the third thing. Plans for what? Plans for being, probably. Not so much what I'm going to do, but what would you have me be? Then I ask God for inspiration when I may face indecision. I relax and take it easy. Can you imagine? I usually hit the wall of the door going 100 miles an hour, full of all these things I'm going to do. For me to relax and take it easy means I've started at a completely different place. But there's a period of meditation, and he says we usually conclude this period with prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be. Why? Because I want to stay on the right side of the page. I want to stay over there. We may also add this idea from the family afterwards. What can I do for the man who still suffers? Show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love from page 83. Give me the right self-talk for the intent I've chosen. We get on target by being off target. So now I'm in the middle of the day. I have prepared myself for the day by taking the very few minutes that this takes in step 11. And as I go through the day, I pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. I drew a little dotted line down between those two things, and I call that the agitation and doubt line. Because I'm over here, and suddenly that car pulls in front of me, and I'm on the right side at 100 miles an hour. And there's no way that I'm going to pause here unless I have begun the day by pausing. I got to get in a practice pause before I'm going to have any shot at this. Pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. Constantly remind myself that I'm no longer running the show, humbly saying to myself many times each day that I will be done. Now I'm in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. Boy, I hated to give up that excitement. Something about leaving late and going at 80 miles an hour was always very, very intriguing to me. And then finally, at the top of page 86, he's already led off with how we're supposed to end our day. And I waited to discuss it and keeping it in chronological sequence. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. What does that mean? It means that I'm not there to tear myself apart. It's not a destructive review. It's a constructive review. I usually do it before I leave the office. Maybe it's at 6 o'clock and I'm going to be at a meeting at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. I will do it then. It doesn't take long, but I have to ask myself some questions. So if I were to do it for today, was I resentful? Yeah, I was resentful that there was noise out there. Was I selfish? Yeah, did I think I had to do it all myself? There was times during this day that I did. Yeah, I forgot that I don't have to do it myself. Was I dishonest or afraid? No, not today. Do I owe an apology? Not yet. Day's not over. Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Not today. Was I kind and loving toward all? Oh, that word all kind of takes me out of the play. I would say no, not toward all. What could I have done better? Been kind and loving toward all. Was I thinking of myself most of the time? Pretty good amount of the time, sure. How do I look? What's my image? Am I coming across? Or was I thinking what I could do for others? Well, I had some thoughts like that. Was I thinking of what I could pack into the stream of life? Isn't that an interesting phraseology? That Wilson is too funny. I mean, it's like his language is just fascinating. The goose hung high, Wilson, what the hell does that mean? What I could pack into the stream of life? I'll tell you what I know about what I can pack into the stream of life. It means I have to be in the stream. I can't be standing at the side of the stream lost in thought. I have to be in the stream. Am I in the stream of life today? Yes. Yeah, sleeves rolled up, doing the deal. Okay with me. Okay with me. Okay with me. What did I pack into the stream of life? A lot today. A lot. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. And we ask God to remove this, sometimes worry, remorse, and morbid reflection. What is morbid reflection? It's that idea of, God, I'm such a dummy. I should have done this. God, that guy outmaneuvered me. Oh, I'm so stupid. Morbid reflection. It will kill the sunlight of the Spirit. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness, inquire what corrective measures should be taken. And I do. And I don't think that I need to ask God's forgiveness. I really need to acknowledge that I need forgiveness and then move on. As far as the corrective measures are concerned, I ask for what corrective measures, and I know that when I wake up tomorrow morning, if there's anything I need to do about today, it will be with me. It will. And not in an unpleasant way. I'll just know, okay, I got to make a phone call. I can't tell you that surprised in the other end of the line sometimes when I call up an attorney and say, you know, yesterday we were at that deposition and I acted like a donkey and I called up to apologize to you for that. And they are stunned. They can't believe. One of them said, God, I wish I could do that. And I was done with it. I was totally done with it. And it took me 2 minutes, max, to clean that up with the guy. And so it's like this whole process of getting ready. Are there any archers in here? Anybody that ever did any archery? This is like archery. Archery is a wonderfully spiritual exercise. It's a wonderfully spiritual exercise because you have that arrow in the bow and you string it and you bring it back and you increase the energy, the kinetic energy in that thing. And then what do? Let go. Let go. You ever try to throw an arrow? Doesn't go anywhere. Can't do it. It just kind of does that about 10 feet out it lands. So what am I doing to add the kinetic energy to the day? I ask God to direct my thinking. I ask that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. I consider my plans for the day. I ask for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. And then I relax and take it easy. I have all the energy that I need for the day. And a way to get back on track if I get back off track. And it works. And it becomes really almost I started to say automatic. It's not automatic. But you stay aware because the price of not being awake during the day. And I'm an awakened human being, and so are you. And we want to stay that way. And so this simple exercise is how we gain discipline, how we gain the things we really want, which is peace of mind and serenity and usefulness. And that really is the essence of how, if there is spirit, and if spirit is bringing everything into my life all the time that I want, and if the only thing that gets in the way of that is my rejection of it, then and I clean up my mind by taking the first 9 steps, and I can do step 10 and 11, there will be no end to the abundance that comes into my life. No end to the disclosures that will come. No end to the love that will come through me. No end to the sweetness and peace of my life. Can I take then that out into the world, an awakened spirit, and add to? Oh yeah, oh it is not difficult. People spot it, sense it in some way and come. And we follow, and our opportunity to do that in AA is incredibly sweet. It's incredibly sweet and always there. And so when we get to step 12, we're really talking about the principle of service, given for free and for fun. Take it everywhere we go. I've told you much about how my relationship